I'm going to set up my Facebook Live as usual. Can y'all see me? Alrighty, well, I'm going to go get started soon. It's been good seeing y'all here on live. I'm just going to snack a little bit. Got a little lunch thing going on. I brought these gooseberries. Hi, Lily. Do you prefer being called Leanna or Lily? I wasn't sure. Feel free to drop in the comments if you have a preference. I have my gooseberry. Hello. I'm going to talk today about being Asian and how we have imposter syndrome in various ways as being Asian folks of the diaspora. Oh, most people call you L. Oh, L. Gotcha. I will keep that in mind, L. So, a lot of folks here are perhaps raised in different settings. Some people are raised in mostly suburban settings or rural settings, and some folks I know are raised in more urban settings where there's a little bit more diversity. Just curious about for you, Elle, or whoever's on the replay watching this, curious about what your settings were growing up. If you were raised in a majority Asian city or surroundings, or if you're maybe one of the only Asian person growing up in your high school or elementary school growing up. And also right now, what is your workplace situation like? Are you one of the only Asians that are there? Are there other BIPOC folks? What is it? What is the demographic like for you in the past and right now? So a lot of us who grew up in these different settings, a lot of the settings can inform how we define our being Asian. And also I noticed that a big way that we define being Asian are from our family members, and that's intergenerationally passed down. Hi, Tiff. So good to see you. Hey. Just talking about how you define your identity, your cultural identity. Elle says, I was one of the few Asians growing up. Now that I'm older, I see more Asian Americans, but I think I would have appreciated seeing them when I was younger. Yeah, so you grew up maybe in a more white kind of surrounding, perhaps. Hi, Tiff. Maybe you grew up being one of the few, you said, and then now that you're older, you see more, you're maybe surrounded by more Asian Americans. But yeah, that appreciation is there, right? To be leading from a place of, oh, this is me as a person, not me as a race. That's real, when you're growing up as one of the few. For me, growing up in New York City, I felt like I was one of the many Asians, but I think there was a lot of pockets of people who had their own definition of their own identity. So I grew up around a lot of Korean Americans who, in their identity as Koreans, really othered me. So I felt even growing up amongst a lot of Asians, it was hard for me to really take a grasp on my identity. And a big part of that is my family culture growing up, because in my family culture, with my parents, I didn't really feel like I could be me either. And they definitely didn't accept me for being me. They really wanted me to conform to more of their traditional ways with like language and culture. And so for me growing up, I noticed that my sense of safety wasn't there. My safety to be me, my safety to like take off my masks, to be um uh like more um questioning my identities or exploring my identities wasn't really there. And that really impacted how I showed up in other spaces. So, curious about how you define you being unapologetically you now versus you being like one of the few growing up, one of the few Asians growing up, or one of many growing up. For me now, being Asian person means simultaneously celebrating my connections to my culture as well as massive amounts of grieving for um, well, cultural connections that I'm celebrating are mainly my cultural connections to other folks who also share similar identities that um, I can share traditions with and share holidays with. So that's been a huge blessing and grief in that I am no longer connected to my mother tongue. I am no longer connected to my mother country. And there's so much like stress there and ambiguity with how I relate to my culture because I was made to feel like such an imposter in my home growing up. And so the imposter syndrome shows up really early when you're talking about like kids who are raised in emotionally immature families with parents who are immigrants who are trying to find their way here and being totally displaced in many ways. And what I noticed is that perfectionism is just comes out of a place of not feeling safe. So, perfectionism is a mechanism for safety. Perfection is a mechanism of um, connection to the larger body of people that you're with. So, and how it showed up in my family was um, I felt really perfectionistic towards my language because I was constantly criticized for my wrong intonations or my incorrect like ways of using chopsticks or my ways of respecting or disrespecting elders. Those are the main things that were called out for me, and my perfectionism showed up um, when I didn't feel safe, which is really often as a mechanism for me to have a sense of belonging. And so, yes, Tiff. Oh, I see you. Tiff, you said same with grieving my mother homeland, Philippines. Yes. Like there's like so much grieving and celebration as we're figuring out what our identities look like and our connection. Yes. Um, and the way imposter syndrome shows up in relation to perfectionism, because they're like best friends. Perfectionism and imposter syndrome are best friends. um, Perfectionism shows up when we're not feeling safe and we're trying to um, grasp safety in whatever way we can. So it's really just merely for survival. Perfectionism allows you to survive, it doesn't allow you to thrive. And that's not its role. It has a very limited role for giving you a sense of temporary safety in the midst of a lot of like uh, maybe like psychological unsafety or family unsafety. If you have like chaotic parents, like I did, who were constantly on edge and very critical, and they were constantly like activated when I spilled something or when I did something wrong or made a mistake. Perfectionism becomes my a younger version's like way to create safety, and it is a response to ultimately a response to systemic oppression because a whole people group are displaced by colonization, forced to immigrate, and then are like ejected from their homelands. And that displacement creates a sense of unsafety to begin with within a large mass of people. And then you have these large masses of people parenting their own children from a place of lostness and displacement. So perfectionism is, and I hope you're catching a theme here, like with my lives and with my posts, that like what Western culture considers like personal failings, it's actually a systemic failing. So perfectionism, if you want to see it in like the pop psychology way, it's like so individualistic. People are like really trying to help you to see it as like a personal thing that you need to grow from and change. And for me, I view it as a really wise way that we have um, used to adapt when we don't feel safe. And for me, I am in so much gratitude to the parts of me that the younger parts that really use perfectionism growing up and even now as a way to find community, as a way to find a sense of belonging when I didn't feel a sense of belonging, as a way um, to temporarily feel safe and to temporarily feel grounded, even if it was like a false sense of grounding. And I, um, imposter syndrome being perfectionism's best friend is basically, to sum it up, it's a phenomenon when people feel self doubt and a sense of being fraudulent despite evidence of like competency. And it is, again, based in systemic oppression because you end up feeling like a charlatan or a fraud or somebody that's fake, when in fact, the structures and the system that oppress us are the ones that are fake. They are the ones that are um, incompetent. They are the ones that are fraudulent. They are the ones that are exploitative and seek to, um, out of their own fakeness, project that fakeness onto society, especially the most marginalized, like BIPOC folks. And then we internalize that as us being the problem. And so, growing up in your families, you might have experienced this too. I see, Tiff. Thank you for that encouragement. I growing in your up in your family, you might have experienced that same like that systemic parallel, which is like systems of oppression, being charlatans, projecting that shit onto us and making us feel fraudulent. But that happens on a family level too. Like, so it happens on multiple levels: family level, systemic level, and how it shows up in our earliest imprints is through our parents. So our parents were expert charlatans in how they used imposter syndrome to cope. Um, I mentioned in one of my posts previously that immigration, what the part of immigration trauma, the impact of it is that our parents are seen by mainstream culture as children and we're seen as adults. And so that is a perfect setup for imposter syndrome. And what that means is that when your parents, even if they have advanced degrees, even if they're like decorated with many, many accomplishments, um, they are forever seen as little children because of how systemic oppression views people who are displaced by colonization. They view them as they infantilize them. They see them as little kids, incompetent. And as a result of that pain that our parents experience, they then project that onto us, expecting us to care for them in an inappropriate way. So they expect us to be an adult. They expect us to be more mature. They expect us to be caretakers, which is why a lot of us therapists are um, therapists because we've leveraged that skill of caretaking since we were born. We have basically have advanced degrees in caretaking because we've been doing it since day one. Um, and that is a huge setup for imposter syndrome because we are just like, I don't know what the F I'm doing, but I'm just gonna fake it until I make it. And that actually becomes like imprinted in us. So the imprint of fake it till you make it is a way to protect the younger part of you from experiencing the trauma, the systemic trauma of folks infantilizing your parents and you. And so for us as like children of immigrants, and this is why I work with Asian identified folks of the diaspora of any generation, first, second, third, fourth, fifth generation, folks who are in this experiencing, and specifically, I work with women, non binary, trans folks because we, this is our experiences are so different than male identified folks and families. Um, and if y'all are here, I don't know who's here on the live, but if y'all are like, y'all have like male cousins or male siblings, I would love for you to share a little bit about how you notice their conditioning growing up and their like experience of even like taking care of their parents and how it looks different than our experience as like women identified folks, non binary folks, trans folks, of like how we experience that conditioning and that caretaking for our parents and how that showed up. Um, I know for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, I found myself expected to kind of be really similar to my mom, to often obey without questioning. And I noticed my male cousins, they their families did allow, they forced them to obey, but there was way more leeway for them to disobey and way less of they're just different expectations on how they were to show up in families. So like um the imposter syndrome, yes, underneath is still there with male identified Asian bodies. Um, but with females, it shows up in the like need for being perfect caretakers. So that's like how perfectionism and imposter syndrome go hand in hand from an early age. It's perfect caretaking, meaning you have to show up, you have to be happy to caretake, and you have to shove all your needs and shove it down um, in the name of being a happy and submissive and martyred caretaker. That's part of the illusion of perfectionism is like, if we maintain that, then we're safe. If we maintain that, then we have a sense of belonging. If we maintain that, then we can connect to our families. If we maintain that, then there will be conditional love. And that shows up in the movie, in the show Beef with Ali Wong's character, Amy Lau. And she, if you notice, there's a scene where her and George were fighting in the gallery with where the seats were in the seats gallery, and they were fighting about the mental load that each had to carry. And then um, June and Fumi are sitting in a distance, and Junie goes, "Hi, mommy. Hi, daddy." And in the middle of their fighting, you could see their face totally switch to a big smile and waving. And that is that, like, that moment for me totally exemplified what it means to be that like fake caretaker and what we're like expected, how we're expected to be on all the time and expected to serve with a smile on our face. So Elle wrote, often wonder what it would be like to have a brother. I notice a lot of caretaking responsibilities fall into feminine presenting people. I feel like we're held to higher expectation as well. Yes. Safety often feels conditional. L, safety does feel conditional, and that means it wasn't safe. That means it was not safe. If there's conditionalness with safety and belonging, that means there wasn't true belonging, which a lot of us knew already underneath, right? L and whoever's out there. Um, it is a lot of us often as kids, our only tool as kids is perfectionism. Our only way of coping is perfectionism. So the illusion is if we can chase good moods, because our parents are often emotionally immature parents are often very moody. So what we have to do is we have to chase their good moods. And that means we have to be like constantly hyper vigilant and constantly looking out as to what's going on in the landscape, what's going on in the family. We y'all, we are experts in reading the room. Can I get an amen to that? Because that has been something that has been trained up in me to be a person who's like reading people's energy really well. And caretakers are experts in that, right? Like we know how to read the room. We know when the mood shifts and we know when something changes in the in their parents' energy. As a result, we grow up to be like really deep empathizers, really deep uh, compassionate people who care for others, but oftentimes don't care for ourselves. So that imposter syndrome, it drives us to be looking externally for that safety. Perfectionism forces us to believe that we can only find a sense of belonging outside of us and safety outside of us instead of going into our bodies. And why it is something that doesn't work in terms of like a lot of people say, what have you tried to like improve on your perfectionism or grow in this area of perfectionism? And a lot of people will obviously try to work harder. Why is working harder not working? Is because you're chasing something that is just an illusion. You're chasing something that you'll actually never get, which is a sense of safety, because that safety needs to come inside, not outside. And perfectionism is such a good temptress in that it makes us believe that things will get better. It's very optimistic. It's very forward thinking, very positive, but also very cynical as well. The temptress and the goddess of perfectionism allows us to keep trying and keep chasing, give us the illusion that we could fix something in us, the sense of feeling deeply unsafe, just by the actions of doing more and trying harder. That's not going to work because safety ultimately lies within you. The second thing that doesn't work is second things that people have tried are to just slow down. Have you just heard people tell you like slow down, downshift, draw boundaries? Um, like that is just not going to work because slowing down to a person that is like highly activated and working really hard and going at a really fast pace is actually really it brings up even more activation for your body. So there's something called the window of tolerance. The window of tolerance just means that there are limits to when your body actually feels like they're able to learn. So and grow and integrate stuff. That window of tolerance is really small for some people who are raised in emotionally chaotic families, and it's larger for people who have been raised in nurturing families. So when you think of that window of tolerance, the key is to stay in that window. The key is to find that upper and lower limit so that you're able to stay in that window. For people who are moving at a frantic pace, who have millions of things on their to-do list, who have really built in no buffers and no margins for rest and are going, going, going. Um, I had this, there's a lot of my clients who are all high achieving. And so we, with one of my clients, wrote down like all the obligations that they had for their extracurriculars activities as well as their like career stuff. And we inventoried it, and it was they were operating in many boards of nonprofits. They had many athletic extracurriculars. It added up to 14 extracurriculars. So when you're working with like a person who has a ton on their plate that they voluntarily put stuff on their plate, their window of tolerance to slow down is actually really small. So when you tell someone who's working at a really fast pace to slow down, it's actually they're gonna be like, fuck you. I'm not gonna slow down. That's dangerous to my body to slow down. So when you have a person who's working at a really high pace, slowing down needs to be tempered. Slowing down needs to be in a container of safety with maybe a practitioner or community that can temper that down. So when I think of tempering, I think of um, like folding eggs into a batter without overcooking the eggs. So if the batter is too hot, you're opening your raw egg and you're tempering something to make like a glaze or like some kind of sauce. If you if if you go too fast and you slow that like you put the egg in too quickly, that egg will actually overcook and it will um become like kind of like egg drop soup. But if you actually slow it down, if you like wait until the temperature is lower, that egg won't actually it will come really nicely into that sauce. So that's what I think of when I think of tempering. When you're asking someone who's really activated to slow down, tempering is actually the key to building the capacity to stay in your window of tolerance. So when you're going, 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 and you're asking a person to do yoga, you're asking a person to do meditation work, or even going to sleep at night is activating. Like for folks who are doing millions of things, and going to sleep is such a really difficult task because you're asking a person to go from 100 to zero, doing things that will, um, going on walks, talking to a friend, connecting, being witnessed, being understood, being validated will actually take that activation down. I don't know if y'all resonate with this. Drop it in the comments if y'all feel like this is something that resonates or you struggle with, which is like having a lot of things on your plate and then finding it difficult to slow down. And when people tell you to slow down, it's like, F you. Let me know if that resonates for you. The other thing that people try to tell people to do is the other like negative effect of slowing down is other parts of you that are polarized to that slowing down will react. So, like in Beef, in the show Beef with Ali Wong and Stephen Yoon, um, they yes, fuck all the way off. You're gonna pay my bills. Yes. Oh my gosh, Tiffany. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like it's a matter of safety, right? Like slowing down feels highly unsafe to us in our bones. And I talked about intergenerational trauma in some of my live yesterday, but intergenerational trauma is basically the unfinished business of your ancestors living in your body. So we have 14 generations of that unresolved business from my ancestors living in our bodies. And some of that coping for colonization, which was resulted in deep, deep violence and displacement for people, one of the best coping mechanisms was staying busy. It was staying busy. It was not idling. It was to continue to move, continue to work, continue to um, put your head down. And it is ingrained in our nervous systems as a loving signpost from my ancestors that it is not safe to slow down. It is not safe to rest. It's not, because when you rest, you are punished. When you rest, you are abused. When you rest, you were assaulted. When you were resting, your kids were separated from you. I mean, this was the real consequence of resting in our ancestral lines. And in the first time, this is the first time in our ancestral lineage that we have the luxury of rest, and yet we cannot even hold it. We cannot even hold it. To slow down is so painful. And the work is building that tolerance in our nervous system and talking to the polarizing parts. So in beef, the polarizing parts that came up with Amy and Danny was rage, rage directed outward, rage directed in the form of blame. And that is really wise. That's a yet another really wise thing, because as kids, when we were told to obey and to work, when did we get a chance to have that rage? That rage is a sign that our perfectionism is driving us to mistreat ourselves. That rage is a sign that our environment is abusive and dehumanizing. That rage is not something to be judged, because it is actually protecting. It's protecting and looking out for our best interests, so we are not faced with being dehumanized by people around us in our environment. That rage is a signpost that the people that you are surrounding yourself with are actually people that are not serving you. And maybe that's hard to hear, because as kids, we have no choice. We have no choice as to who we surround ourselves with. We have no choice as to who our parents are. We're stuck. We're stuck in our families. And we use perfectionism and working hard to survive that season of being stuck and trapped. But now that you're older, your body actually is still stuck in that time zone, in that place, and doesn't even know that you're an adult now, that you have other coping skills, that you have resources, that you have support, that you could actually come alongside this burdensome pattern and have other strategies to alleviate it, not only in the short term, but in the long term. And so the things that people the things that can really be supportive of us going from burnout, doing a zillion things at once, to not being burnt out, to be perfectionistic, to have imposter syndrome, to showing up as our unapologetic Asian authentic selves, is the work of working through our woundings from our inner child. Ultimately, it's the abandonment wounds that we have from um, our parents threatening to drop us, threatening to leave us. I don't know if y'all grew up with this, but I remember growing up in the park, my parents would say, like, I'm leaving you right now if you don't like come with me. Or like at home, they'd be like, doing countdowns with me if I'm acting up, or if they're like threatening to just drop me. And that stays in your system. And that, I believe, is another intergenerational wound. um, when you have these um, parents who are in their immaturity and they haven't done their work, as well as the ancestral, like, lingering effects of their unfinished business in your body, that all coincides into, at the end of the day, having these woundings in your inner child. And perfectionism and imposter syndrome is actually what's protecting you from feeling that pain. So your perfectionism, you're working hard, you're trying to make things right. Even as a parent, like I feel that way. This is where it hits me um really, really hard as a parent is my belief, my perfectionism comes up. It doesn't come up with work. I mean, I guess it does, but not as much. Like you can see my Instagram posts, they're all filled with typos and I don't even go back and fix them. But with my kids, I feel such a fear of messing them up that I believe that if I could just be this happy mom, that they won't be messed up, that they won't experience this trauma. And I know that that's not real. I know that's not going to be the case. Like, this is not true. Like, perfectionism is not going to prevent them from feeling trauma. But this is how I feel it in my body. And oh, Tiffany says, I feel that to the core. Yeah, yeah. Like we feel that protection in different ways. We feel that like fear of abandonment in different ways. And I deeply, the way I internalize it is I've displaced my need for validation from my parents to my kids. So now I'm like, I fear abandonment or rejection from my kids. And that is like a way that I'm acting out my inner child wounds. Yes, I do feel like deep, deep, deep down my abandonment towards, like my fear of abandonment towards my parents. And that's still there. But how it shows up in the day to day is I am um, I really look for the gold stars on Instagram. I really care when people follow me or unfollow me. I really care about their comments. All those things are for me a result of my inner child abandonment wounds. And for my kids, when they get mad at me, I am when anytime somebody gets mad at me, my partner or my children, that shows up less as a indication of anything. I take it so personally, and that is also how that inner child abandonment wound shows up, where that younger part of you is like, oh my gosh, I feel the pain that I absolutely don't want to feel. That's like the core wounding of our childhood is the fear of being dropped. And with our caregivers, um, we in our day to day, they see it, they experience it themselves, and in their fear of being dropped themselves, they will drop us as a way to cope before we drop them. So that's for them. How their intergenerational wounding shows up is they're so quick to drop us because they don't want to be dropped. And for us, we act it out within ourselves, towards ourselves. So towards in a violent way towards ourselves, like dropping ourselves, abandoning ourselves, betraying our own needs so we can care for others so that other people won't drop us. And the goal in how we can do this, how we can integrate um, all of our identities, all of our woundings, come to a place of safety is through that somatic inner child healing. And what I mean by that is addressing those wounds from a somatic perspective, noticing that our bodies and minds are connected to each other, slowing down in a safe container, a safe enough container. There's like no such thing as a safe container, but slowing down when we slow down in a way that is um, held by uh, a container that can hold our activations and can actually handle if we lash out ourselves on us or each other or the practitioner. um, Slowing down in that safe container, being witnessed and understood and validated in real time actually helps us to grow our window of tolerance so that when we actually slow down, draw boundaries, downshift, do all the external things that are like strategies, it can actually integrate into our bodies so that our bodies can receive that slowing down without feeling completely in danger, completely out of our window of safety. So I don't know if that resonates with y'all and how y'all have struggled with slowing down when you're like completely burned out, having a million things on your plate, wrestling with perfectionism, and how that's the driving force for our imposter syndrome. Let me know in the comments about um, what points did you were you like resonant with those things, and what questions you might have in how to get from imposter syndrome to integration, from perfectionism to slowing down. Hey, Lauren, it's good to see you. I don't know if you're still on, but it's so good to see you here. Um, Let me know if I'll stay on for a little bit if y'all have any questions. Just to do a quick recap, we covered how being Asian in majority Asian spaces or majority white spaces has really impacted our sense of safety and identities. The theory is that your nervous system and your body is um, really deeply affected by the five people that are closest to you in proximity and in relationship. So, growing up, if you had five people, top five people who are extremely dysregulated, extremely immature, or even other kids, like a lot of us grew up with parents who were kind of like hands off, and we were left to fend for ourselves. And the five most impactful bodies around us were our teachers and our peers. And our teachers and our peers are not going to provide that sense of safety for us. So we're left to kind of like do things on our own. And that being left to do things on our own creates imposter syndrome. And so does immigration trauma when our parents are seen as children and we are seen as adults. So that creates immigration trauma, and that drives perfectionism, because perfectionism is just an external strategy to try to gain internal safety. And perfectionism drives us to burnout and to do a zillion things in order to feel grounded. But actually, it causes us to just like burn to a crisp, and then we're finding ourselves looking for strategies like boundaries, looking for strategies to downshift, to slow down, but actually those things don't really work, because if you tell a person who's like doing a zillion things to slow down, they're like, fuck you. I got bills to pay, like Tiffany said, or I got like kids to feed. And there's that slowing down needs to be tempered gradually over time and microdosed within a container of safety and being witnessed and being understood. And it's really in the form of relationships. Ultimately, at the end of the day, safety happens in relationships. It depends on who you're in relationship with. Like I said, the five people that you're surrounded with are the most influential in your life, and their nervous system states, if they're completely dysregulated, they're gonna like your nervous system is gonna feel that. And then also, when you're downshifting, your relationship to yourself is actually ultimately what's going to bring safety. So the vehicle from burnout to safety, from doing a zillion things to downshifting, really comes in relationship with others and relationships to yourself. So the relationship to yourself piece, I want to expand on a little bit. The relationship to yourself and how you get safety is actually not from just like um, just doing nervous system regulation work in and of itself, but the idea is that you get safety from when your inner children are in relationship to your higher self. And that brings nervous system safety. So there's new like pop culture kind of like views out there that like just focus on nervous system regulation. So there's a lot of like somatic practitioners out there that are like, if you just in isolation practice nervous system regulation, you're going to get safety. And that is actually false. In my opinion, this is just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. Safety happens with your five people that you're most surrounded by in your nervous system regulation and your experience with them, and safety with your inner children and you. So if you see yourself as being made up of multiple children, multiple little versions of yourself that have each its own beliefs, each its own behaviors, each its own roles, and you have a higher version of yourself, which is everyone is born with. It's the essence of who you are. It's your intuitive wisdom, your intuitive mother, your mother figure that is like the mother figure you never had. That part of you connecting and being in relationship with your inner children is inherently what brings safety. It's that relationship. Um, and that is ultimately the vehicle that will take you from burnout to safety. I know that's like, first of all, can be controversial to say, and it's a very unique perspective. But I want you to hear, I want to hear your like thoughts and questions about that because it's probably something that is confused, can be confusing. But I'm curious about what y'all have like thought about and like how y'all have experienced safety in the past and what safety means to you. Oh, yeah, Tiffany thinks safety equals relationships. Yeah, it does. It does. Safety equals relationships. I was actually at a brunch with Tiffany on Sunday. I don't know if they're still here, Tiffany, but I was at a brunch with Tiffany on Sunday, and I don't know if you saw in my stories. We did like a kanji bar, and on Saturday or Friday, I was really feeling kind of like isolated. And when I get into that isolated state, I know I've learned throughout all these years of doing my inner work that I cannot meditate myself out of that isolated state. I can't take walks. I can't do yoga. I can't, like, that doesn't work for me when I'm feeling so dysregulated. I just need people. I just need people. And I just, sometimes a phone call does do the trick, but like, really, it's like sharing food with my favorite people. And Tiffany, you're like one of my favorite people for sure. Um, if y'all have any thoughts about that, any thoughts about like what it means to be surrounded by like who are your five people that are most influential in your circles in your life too, like that bring you that sense of like maybe it's safety but also maybe it's chaos. um I'm just curious about like how you notice people's nervous systems affecting your sense of safety, especially those top five people. Mm, thank you, Tiffany. I got you too, Tiffany. I'm so glad you're in my life. Mm. Well, if there's any other thoughts, feel free to like drop it in the comments, drop it in my DMs, um, drop it in the chat. Feel free to message me if you have any thoughts. Like, I'm really curious about like if you disagree with me. Like, I want to hear your disagreements. I also want to hear like how have you tried slowing down in the past and how it's like maybe worked for you, maybe not worked. I'm curious about that too. Um, I know for me, right now, I could really only handle a certain number of working hours a week. And once I hit 40, I knew I'm turning 40 this year, and I knew it was going to be a game changer because I got up this morning, y'all, and my knees hurt. And my knees hurt because I was sleeping. And I'm like, okay, this is a sign that I need to like care for myself in a different way. Tiffany says, I hear that you're not good enough and feel it in my stomach. Usually, when that happens, I innately stay in bed. I can't move. Mm, mm. Yes, I've been feeling isolated too. And that brunch this past weekend really helped me with creating that container. Yup. Preach it. Mm-hmm. Ooh, that you're not good enough feeling in the pit of your stomach is so real. It's so real. And you're right. Like when we feel that, it's so hard to move. It like puts you in a freeze state, right? Like you need to get going, but then you you're pulled back in by this like paralyzing experience of you're not good enough. That is the crux of what we're working with at the end of the day, like with perfectionism. Perfectionism is that strategy that protects you, the younger version of yourself, from feeling that shitty, you're not good enough shame, that shitty, like pain of like, you are not good enough, you don't belong. And yes, like working with, I'm curious about like how you've gotten yourself out of bed. If you're still on, I don't know if you're still on, Tiffany, but like, how do you eventually get out of bed? Like what has been helpful in the past? If anyone else has questions, I'm happy to stay on or just like comments, perspectives. By the way, I was telling people earlier that I'm eating these like golden berries. They're like these things that I bought at Trader Joe's. They are so good. Receiving your text and unschooling. Oh, yeah, that's what helps you get out of bed sometimes. Yeah, receiving text messages and the unschooling crew group texts. Yeah, yeah. Text messages like they help me too. Like they help me get up and out when I'm like in that free state. Cause yes, it's just like helpful to get like drawn out sometimes that way. Um, I hope to see all of y'all sometime. My next live will be on Friday morning. I'm talking about what am I talking about? Um, I just can't say no is actually decreasing safety, how to create safety instead. Um, I just can't say no. So yes, I will talk about not saying no, um, and how that also decreases safety. And you're saying, just knowing that I'm not doing this parenting thing alone. Yeah, you're not alone, Tiff. We're in it together for sure. We're in it together. I will see y'all on Friday for the next live, maybe. And then Tiffany, hopefully I'll see you on Sunday. Maybe we can hang out then. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.